The 2005 Indianapolis Grand Prix. You know it's good when the second line on its Wikipedia page reads, "The event is one of the most notorious motor races in motorsport history." This story starts with how all good things start, with tires, of course. The two main suppliers of tires in Formula One at the time were Michelin and Bridgestone. Out of the 10 teams on the grid at the time, 7 of them, British American Racing, Renault, Sauber, Toyota, Williams, Red Bull, and McLaren, used Michelin tires. The 3 remaining teams, Jordan, Minardi, and Ferrari, used Bridgestone tires. Now, the venue, the iconic Indianapolis Motor Speedway, had an interesting kind of track for this occasion. Turn 13 was a banked area with high speeds, which was super rare in Formula One at the time. Along with this, the speedway had a certain kind of track surface that caused a lot of wear on the tires. The ground was basically just very sharp. However, the upside for this was that it was far easier to maintain due to Indianapolis actually having seasons. Alright, I know I've been boring so far, but this is actually where the story gets good. On a free practice session on Friday of the race weekend, Ralf Schumacher of Toyota, a Michelin supply team, had quite the nasty crash over at turn 13. It was the result of a rare left tire failure. He had to be replaced by their test driver Ricardo Zonta for the rest of the weekend, who then also had the same kind of tire failure. The day after, Michelin said that they had no clue why the tires were failing on this corner, and that their solution would be to fly out more tires with different specs from their headquarters in Clermont-Ferrand, France. They were kind used at the Spanish Grand Prix earlier in the year, but when they were tested, they had all of the same problems as the other ones. And now that the Michelin tires were failing with no immediate solution in sight, they only had one option. They held a meeting. All 10 team principals, Speedway President Tony George, multiple Michelin representatives, CEO and President of Formula One Management Bernie Ecclestone, and also some Michelin technical representatives were there. But one person who was not there was Team President of Ferrari, Jean Todt. Quite responsible. At this meeting, they discussed their options. The Michelin reps basically reiterated that these tires were not going to last more than 10 laps, so they asked the Bridgestone team's president if they could build a chicane, and they said, sure. They all discussed the ideas of having a speed limit going into turn 13 and having pit stops every 10 laps, 2 solutions that were made up by the FIA. I haven't told you about the FIA, and I apologize for that. They're pretty important. I'll do that right now. The FIA, or the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, is basically the sanctioning body that holds Formula One together, you know? They create all the rules, and the drivers and teams have to enforce them, and they certify and check all of the cars and all of the tracks that they drive on, all the Grand Prix drive on, you know? And they're a organization that has garnered a lot of controversy, and let's just say that this 2005 Indianapolis Grand Prix was an example. After agreeing that the chicane was the way to go, they all instructed the Michelin techs to start building it. Ecclestone then went and told Todt and FIA President Max Mosley, again, a man that has his fair share of opinions. Ecclestone returned sometime later and reported that Todt had basically said,
I missed the part where that's my problem.
And Mosley said that if they tried to build that chicane, he would cancel the race outright. Then they said, fine, we don't need no FIA. We're gonna make that chicane and run this race even if Ferrari doesn't show up. Then they were told that the FIA would withdraw their entire staff if they did that. So then they decided they would get their own people to run the race. They didn't need no FIA. And then they were also reminded that because the FIA is the body that enforces all the rules for a race, the entire thing would basically be a free-for-all because there would be no one there to enforce the rules. To which they said, hey everyone, can we all be nice and mutually agreed to not do anything crazy? Okay, thank you. Then they all brought the drivers in to tell them to plan. And after consulting them, they decided that agreeing with the FIA was the best way to do things and that they should try and come to an agreement. Then the Renault team president Flavio Briatore got on the phone with Max Mosley, and Mosley was pissed. Apparently Max had rejected all their proposals. Instead, if they did any funny business trying to run this race without the FIA or with a chicane, all FIA-related motorsport in the United States would be under threat. He later went on to say this quote was false and the entire conversation never happened, but it's more interesting, so let's go with it. Now, everyone in that meeting had reached the end game. All of their ideas had been harshly rejected, and they came up with one plan to end all plans. After some of this material had gone out to the public of what was going on overall with Michelin, Bridgestone, and Mosley, and the FIA, Some rumblings began to occur about this plan, and the only thing people knew for sure was that it was going to be a disaster.
And Renault, I can see where I am at the moment, and they are all clearing 2 Formula One car spaces for each of their cars to come in and retire.
Here comes Alonso, World Championship
Okay,
leader.
mate, you know our plan is for the start. Straight in the pits, please, mate.
Yeah, well, he knows that because he's on his way in already. Looks like teammate Fisichella just in front of him, and I think that McLaren Toyota, there's the pole sitter Jarno Trulli pouring into the pits, and just listen to the crowd.
I'm open.
They're stunned, we're stunned. 2 Ferraris on pit straight. Will it be 2 Jordans and 2 Minardi? Some talk the Minardis won't do it. There's a Jordan, and ahead of him is a Minardi. So all the Bridgestone runners are going down to the grid. Coulthard was making a late bid.
This is what they decided on. The Michelin teams were not going to race today. They were going to protest. Six cars even remain. It's the Bridgestone teams, Minardi, Jordan, and Ferrari. The hundreds of thousands of fans at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway are absolutely furious. They're mad at Max Mosley, the director of the FIA. They believe that he is responsible for not authorizing any of the plans that the teams made up. By the time the race is even halfway over, a majority of them already left the building. There's no point to be here anymore, really. Ferrari, almost painfully easily, won this race. They had a 1-2 podium finish with the legendary Michael Schumacher taking the top spot. They lapped everyone else on the grid, although 6 people. The person who came in 3rd place, Tiago Monteiro, had been lapped once, but he still got 3rd place. Michael took his award, and he smiled painfully. Then he left. And at the end of the day, Tiago was the only person in the entire Indianapolis Motor Speedway who had something to smile about. Here's a fun fact. The fans who went to the 2005 Indianapolis Grand Prix were compensated by Michelin themselves and not the actual speedway, and bought 20,000 tickets to the 2006 Grand Prix to give out to fans who went to the 2005 disaster. The United States Grand Prix had an immediate odd history after this. It wasn't dead forever, as the race was held in Indianapolis 2 straight years after this incident. Schumacher also won in 2006, and Lewis Hamilton won in 2007. But that would be the last time an F1 race was held in Indianapolis. After the 2007 Grand Prix, Formula One management and the Speedway's management could not come to an agreement to hold races there in the future. The Indianapolis Grand Prix was dead. There wasn't a Grand Prix in the United States for 5 years until they returned to the US in 2012, running races at the Circuit of the Americas, which is where they are today. They also recently announced a new Grand Prix in Miami, giving the United States 2 different Grand Prix in a year, which is sort of rare actually for a country. Even though there have been some doubts about Formula One's popularity in America in recent years, the GPs have gotten huge amounts of people showing up. That's something I'd like to add I'm very proud of. Alright, I should probably wrap this up and give you the main idea right now. If I had to put a message to all this, it would probably be that protesting is a great thing. Because look at where protesting got Michelin. It's real prolific, Charlie. You did good today.
I tell you one story, not so long ago. In Monza, we had the death of a marshal. And all of us drivers agreed we would want, for the first 2 chicanes, yellow flags. And there was no less than 2 or 3 team owners which told their drivers, you would not respect the yellow flag. Just ignore what you have maybe said or not said. We want you to race, and we force you to race. And it's the same people that have been today on the other side. So Formula One is a tough business. We're working very hard, and as I mentioned before, we have had a tire which is quicker. We didn't use that because of we knew what is going to face us here. I'm not saying that the others purposely choose something wrong, but whatever it is their problem, not our problem. And I don't think you can ask the people who are not responsible for to take the responsibility.